What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. Today, joining me, Jimmy Watkins. Jimmy, how you doing? How was your weekend? Glad to have you back on the pod, my friend.
Football weekend down at Ohio State for Ohio State, Iowa. It was nice to get a breath of fresh air and away from the smoke and smoldering fire emanating from Berea right now. I can see my future, Ethan, and I think there's gonna be a lot of press conferences where the Browns have some splaining to do. That's what I'll say.
All I know is we got the right guy for the job to ask the hard questions. Jimmy Watkins, columnist, cleveland.com. Jimmy, I wanted to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of this upcoming Cavs season, right? Preseason, first game is tomorrow, Tuesday. I'm excited for it. It's going to be my first time covering a preseason game. But also, we want to kind of look at the teams surrounding them, especially in the Eastern Conference, and get some power rankings going. Chris is under the weather. He could not join us today, but I wanted to get your thoughts on the teams around the league, where you rank them right now when it comes to their strength of roster, strengths of lineup, strengths of starting fives, and then see where the Cavs fall into those rankings, Jimmy. I mean, I feel like it's really difficult when it comes to the Eastern Conference after you get past the number one seed, right? The Boston Celtics are number one for a lot of people's overall power rankings, definitely in the Eastern Conference. I want to split them up for right now. I'm going to split the East and split the West, and then we'll go into both of them. But we're going to start in the East. Boston Celtics is number one. Then it kind of gets interesting. It gets dicey because not only are these teams newly put together, but they also have flaws, right? There are teams that are here that we've seen play well together. We've seen them also have downtime as well. For me, I know we've had this conversation when it comes to what the Cavs are going to do in the regular season, when it comes to chasing wins, when it comes to all these other things that some other teams might not be doing because they might be holding out some players for injuries or injury reserve and all those other things. But Jimmy, for me, the second team on this list has got to be the New York Knicks, right? And as much as Cavs fans might want to argue with me on that and say, oh, we don't want to be anywhere lower than the second seed because that makes us possible to play Boston before the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't want that to happen for the Cavs either. I'm just going on what's realistic. For me, the third seed is a toss-up. I could see it as the Cavs. I could see it as the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm going to give the nod to the Cavs as of right now just because Joel Embiid hasn't been healthy down the stretch. Paul George is getting up there in age. And I feel like when it comes down to the stretch, the final stretch of the season, if the Cavs are healthy, they'll have more of a group presence when it comes to taking on those teams. So that makes the New York Knicks second. That makes the Cavs third. And then that makes the Philadelphia 76ers fourth for me. And then it gets really interesting, right? Because you think about Orlando, you think about Indiana, you think about the Miami Heat, right? All three of those teams could fall into that category of being the fifth spot. I'm going to give Orlando the nod on that one. I'm going to put Indiana 6, and I'm going to put Miami 7. And that's where I'm going to stop my list for right now because I feel like that's the most important for teams that are going to be in contention for being in a locked-in playoff spot rather than a play-in seed team, even though I know 7 gets into that conversation as well.
Yeah, I think it's easier for us to – it's hard – the top state's easy, then it gets weird. It's really easy to start from the bottom. I'm thinking about this in terms of tiers. This tier of teams I know that the Cavs will be better than. We're looking at let's say, Raptors, Pistons, Hornets, Nets, Hawks, Wizards. Look at that. Look how many teams I just knocked off our list right there. One of those teams is going to make the play-in that I just mentioned, which is a sad state of affairs on the Eastern Conference there. And I haven't done the quick. So if we have 7, one of those teams might make the playoffs. We're probably looking at the Hawks, the Bulls. I think the Hornets could be frisky if they could stay healthy this year. But we don't need to spend too much time talking about those teams. I just thought that was a quick and easy exercise. Then we'll tier these teams. Next group, we're going bottom up. Teams that I think are on the same playing field as the Cavs. And for those, I have Indiana, made the Eastern Conference Finals last year. Granted, it with an injury asterisk next to both of their series wins over the Bucks and the Knicks. Knicks were just looking for available bodies by the end of that series. The Miami Heat are I think it's got to be time for them to start taking the regular season a little bit more seriously. But I will. The Heat are one of those teams that I gotta see them die before they die. That's not an original take. Their culture is so strong. Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler, proven partnership. Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the league. Argue for number 2. I'm still putting them in that. Even though they've been a play-in team the last couple of years, I believe in that. I believe in that organization. Orlando, and I think that's where I make the cut. And then there's your contender tier. And I'm thinking this more. It sounds like you were ranking like regular season. I think that the Cavs, I've said this before on this podcast, I think it's totally plausible the Cavs could end up with a better playoff seed than a few of the teams I'm about to mention. I just think that when we get to the spring and it's time to line up and play a 7-game series, I like the Knicks, Bucks, Celtics, and Sixers over the Cavs in those areas. I like where you're coming at it with the Knicks. We know that Tom Thibodeau, I wish Tom Thibodeau would care less about regular season wins. I don't envision that changing anytime soon. So I think the Knicks are going to be a regular season wins machine, especially with the new ceiling that they have offensively after the Cat trade. And yes, you're losing. Yes, you should have some questions about Cat as a full-time defensive center, defensive anchor. But I think OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, kind of like the inverse Cavs, like as Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, not reputationally, not the greatest defenders, not the greatest perimeter defenders. Helps to have Jared Allen and Evan Mobley behind them. I think you have the same thing. Cat is not the rim protector that I would pick first if we're drafting them, but OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges are so good on the perimeter. And OG Anunoby is guarding Joel Embiid at points last year. He's on the short list for best defensive players in the league. We haven't even mentioned Josh Hart yet. That team is so solid around Cat defensively that I think they'll be fine. And Tibbs is obviously a really smart defensive coach. I think that team is going to stack regular season wins. I think the Celtics are just a machine at this point. The Bucks and 76ers, high variance regular season teams. Both have old roster, not old rosters necessarily. They have old key players. Brook Lopez, what is he, 37? Coming off offseason surgery. Joel Embiid, we know the story there. Paul George is pushing 35 now. It's now for those teams. It's going to be in the spring for those teams. But how they manage their regular season remains to be seen. But I would, if I'm slotting them at the top here, I would probably go Celtics, Sixers, Knicks, Bucks.
I look like a complete, let's say, butthole because I just forgot about the Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis and Dame's kind of pairing. So that might mess up my list. But I feel like the main thing is Giannis, right? And how they're going to be able to incorporate Dame into that offense. They didn't really. It was funny because you would have thought that they used the pick and roll with them two more last season than they did. And we thought that was going to happen in the playoffs. And it didn't happen as much as you would have thought even then, right? And I think, that probably fudges my list a little bit because I would definitely have them above the Pacers. I still don't think I have them above the Orlando Magic, though, at this point, which is interesting to me just because of the overall lineup. And Jimmy, the way I was thinking about this for power rankings is who has the best team going into the regular season, right? We're talking about not really looking at preseason. All these games don't really matter. LeBron and Bronny are just getting on the court together for the first time. That's the biggest thing right now. Nobody else cares about anything else. I mean, JJ Redick is implementing different offensive sets. We know that Kenny Atkinson is going to try different things. That's the biggest thing from preseason. Power rankings for who has the best lineups going into the regular season. So let me redo mine real quick so I don't sound crazy on this pod and people get on my neck. All right. So we got Boston, the Knicks, the Cavs, Philly, Orlando, Bucks, Pacers, and then you have the Heat. That's where I have them right now for the teams that I feel like are in playoff contention or play-in seed, like above play-in seed, kind of figuring out who we think are going to fight for those top spots. I like because those bottom three spots, that 6 seeded spot, like we saw last year, it could very well come down to the last game of the season. and the Cavs again could be looking at their opponent and saying, "Well, I don't know if we want to win this game because I don't know if we want to play this particular team or whatever." Right? So that's the Eastern Conference. I think that's a pretty solid list. I know I believe you had Philly above the Knicks.
Yeah, I think the ceiling there is really high. I love Maxey. Joel Embiid was the best player in the NBA for the first couple months of last season. Joel Embiid needs to prove a lot during the playoffs, frankly. I mean, it is understandable for a player's efficiency to dip a little bit in the playoffs over time, but that's not what happens to the best of the best players, which is the only tier we should be comparing Joel Embiid against right now. And I understand all that, but I think Paul George and Tyrese Maxey as secondary, tertiary creators, it's the biggest if they stay healthy asterisk in the history of asterisks, but I'm a huge believer in what they're doing with that big three. And Daryl Morey making smart signings on the margins too. I mean, like we're talking stealing Caleb Martin from the Heat. That's a winning postseason player. Kyle Lowry is a much different kind of useful player at this point, but I value the heck out of his veteran experience. He's going to create 40 extra possessions for your team a year just by taking charges and maybe flopping on a few of them, but he's one of the best in the league. I remember looking up a stat at one point last year. He's older. He's a little bit more injury prone now. He has no zip. He barely even looks at the rim these days. He's shooting threes and he's running an offense. He's taking charges, that sort of stuff. But he had played probably 20-ish fewer games. This was like toward the end of last regular season. We're at like the 60, 65 game mark. He played like 15, 20 fewer games than everyone else in the league. And he's still top 10 in charges. I'm not to sound like your high school basketball coach's high school basketball coach here, but I just think it's cool that a 40-year-old dude is putting it out on the line like that. So it's not just the big three. I think that the Sixers have a really well-balanced roster. And I do believe that at some point we're going to get an awesome Joel Embiid playoff run.
Yeah, I mean everybody's hoping for it, right? Because you talk about the tier of player, not necessarily the team. Like it's Jokic, it's Giannis, it's Embiid, it's Luka. Like these guys that are raring for the top players in the league. And the first three guys I named off play the same position. So it's really trying to figure out who those guys are. And you made a point earlier that I wanted to kind of move back to when you were talking about the Knicks and OG Anunoby and their defense and all those things. My question to you, which is very random off the top, is OG Anunoby who Isaac Okoro wants to be? Because when I think about an all defensive team that Isaac Okoro still doesn't have, OG Anunoby has that. He's a 37.6% 3-point shooter. for his career. He shot 39.4 last season, and he shot 39.8 a couple years ago, and 39 even further again. Like I just think when it comes to the catch and shoot, when it comes to the 3-point opportunities, when it comes to the defensive presence, I think OG Anunoby might be who Isaac Okoro wants to be, and they're only, I believe, 4 years apart, right? Because Isaac Okoro is 23, OG Anunoby right now is 27, so it really is just like, okay, who are you modeling your game after? Who are you chasing? Who are you trying to be like? Because we understand the impact that OG Anunoby has on winning, right? For this Knicks team, for this defensive presence that they want to have, especially with Cat potentially being the 5-man, like knowingly, Isaac Okoro is going to need to help out in that kind of way, especially if the Cavs decide to move on from Jared Allen and move Evan Mobley to the 5 and have him as a weaker full-time 5-man.
I think there's probably elements of like the OG Anunoby 3-point shooting development would be something, and OG's still a guy that I think if teams are looking, we talked about this on previous podcasts. If teams are looking for a player to sag off of or help off of in certain series for the against the Knicks, I still think that he is. Man, his 3-point numbers are good. he's still a guy that I think that if we're looking at like above the break threes, teams are going to be more comfortable letting him shoot those. He's from the corner. I think maybe he's graduated to the point where, okay, in all respects, he's a guy you have to respect. From the corner, he's graduated to the point where teams are not going to give him the Isaac Okoro treatment. He's way past all that. So in that regard, yes, there are also like Isaac Okoro can want to be OG Anunoby all he wants. There are just certain realities. OG Anunoby has a crazy wingspan, like over 7 feet long, and some change, I think. Here's I'll say it like this: Isaac Okoro, at certain moments of that Magic series, could not bother Paolo Banchero because of size, right? OG Anunoby guarded Joel Embiid. There's your difference. OG Anunoby can legitimately. I'm not sure he's my ideal choice for some of these more explosive, quick and small spaces guards, but he can legitimately guard 1 through 5. Isaac Okoro, definitely your premier defender at either guard spot, and normal sized wings, I would say. Once we start getting to your apex predator type, like your Jason Tatum's, your Paolo Banchero's, these top 1%ers, 6'8" plus, who can do everything with the ball. I just think that Isaac Okoro works, and you can see that he can defend those guys better than your average Joe, other people at his size. But he just won't ever be, I don't think, OG Anunoby's. It won't ever reach OG Anunoby's ceiling of defense.
I think that's probably the hottest take from that, because Isaac Okoro is still considered the best perimeter defender for the Cavs when it comes to guards, when it comes to
it's take a ruler out. It is harder to shoot over OG Anunoby than it is over Isaac Okoro. It doesn't matter how close Isaac gets. It doesn't matter how few dribble moves he falls for. It doesn't matter how active his hands are. It is harder to dribble around a longer player and taller player. It is harder to shoot over a longer player, taller player. That's just reality.
Yeah, I agree. I just think it's so interesting. I mean, your point about wingspan is phenomenal, because they're only 2 inches in height difference, like 6'5" and 6'7", but the wingspan makes all the difference, right? Talking about guys like between Jokic and Giannis, like the wingspan is completely different, right? And I just think it's really interesting with this league. And you talked about OG Anunoby shooting, right? We have talked and harped on the emphasis on Isaac Okoro being able to shoot, especially from 3-point range, when it comes to the postseason. OG Anunoby's numbers in the postseason, you talk about his shooting numbers were good during the regular season. They just get better. He averages 40% from 3-point range in 36 games and 36 starts in the playoffs. And his highest was in 2017, 2018, where he shot 44.8% from three on basically 3 attempts per game. And he's only started to shoot more, and the percentage hasn't dropped that much. Obviously, when he was with the Raptors in the series that they lost in 6 games in 2021, 2022, that wasn't a good series for anybody on that squad. And he was also just chucking. He shot 6.8 threes a game in that series and shot 34.1%. So, like, that's the bottom tier, and it's still better than what Isaac Okoro has done in his career from 3-point range when it comes to just the playoffs. So
the Cavs would do backflips, by the way, if Isaac Okoro had a playoff series where he's shooting like 6 threes a game and hitting 35% of them. I really think that's the case.
Like Isaac Okoro in the 2 years of playoffs that he's been in, 2022, 2023, he made 30.8% on 2.6 attempts per game from 3. And in last year, he made 25.7% on 2.9 3-point attempts per game. So, like, this is not a knock on Isaac Okoro. It's just saying where the jump is for him. Because I think that if Isaac Okoro wants the respect that I think he wants in this league, OG Anunoby is somebody that he could model his game after a little bit more or just aim to be at. It's just what Jimmy is saying makes so much sense. The wingspan and the height makes it a little bit harder on the defensive end, but Isaac already has the grit, the tenacity to do that. It's just upping his offensive production as well.
Isaac is just, it's such a small sample size of we talked a lot about Isaac during the off season. He just needs to have one of those playoff series or one of those playoff runs where we are seeing during the regular season that he is capable of higher 3-point clips. This is where it gets into the grayest of gray areas. Are we talking? Is this a mental game? Is this a mechanics game? There's all these confounding factors. Is it pressure? The playoffs give so much pressure to different players. It's part of me wants to say it's either going to happen. It's either by this point it's usually happened, but if we're looking to build off further, then some of it is as simple as you just need to see the ball go in more. 3-point confidence. I've said this before on the podcast too. It's a chicken or the egg. You need confidence to make your shots. You need to make your shots to get confidence. And we're going to be talking in circles about Isaac Okoro's 3-point shot until he makes more.
If he makes more. But yeah. And so, Jimmy, I want to get back to our original topic, the Western Conference power rankings and where you have these guys at. Obviously, I think it's definitely interesting because you would think, right, that maybe Denver's still at the top or whatever. For me, I got OKC. I got the Thunder at my top spot in the Western Conference just because it is going to be so hard to stop an offense that consists of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You've got Chet Holmgren, Isaiah Hartenstein, and then on the defensive end, you still have to deal with Jalen Williams and Alex Caruso. Like, I know we talked about the defensive prowess of the Minnesota Timberwolves a lot last year. This Thunder team might challenge them for the best defensive team in the West. And that's not even talking about their offensive side of the game. Like that, and that's what's going to be their bread and butter. But so I have the Thunder at 1, I got the Nuggets at 2, and then it's between Dallas and Minnesota for 3 for me. And just because of the spacing that I think Klay Thompson is going to create, even though he's later into his career, I'm going to give him the nod. I'm going to give them the nod at 3 and put Ant and the Minnesota Timberwolves at 4, especially with the loss of Cat. I think it's going to be difficult to try and replace the amount of shooting he was doing, and especially in the playoffs. Like, Jimmy, I don't know if you remember, but like in the playoffs, Cat was more of a reliable defender than people gave him credit for. And I think that's something that they're They obviously, like I said, they have a great defensive scheme. Rudy Gobert, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, all can play defense, all can hoop. But Cat brought a different element to that and brought a different element to the spacing of the floor. Do they lean into Naz Reid as now the starting power forward? What is that going to look like? Is he still going to be the sixth man? Whatever I think they're going to do, it's going to take a little bit of time for them to figure that out. So I'm going to put them at 4. When it comes to 5, I got to go with the Phoenix Suns. KD, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, another year together. Plus, they got a true point guard in Tyus Jones. I think that might help them. Maybe even go to Brad Beal off the bench. I don't know. It's an interesting lineup that I think they have to consider. And then 6, 7, 8. It's interesting, right? Do you want to put the Kings above the Pelicans and the Warriors? Is Stephen Curry and Draymond, is this their last hurrah? Are they going to go through that? So for the 6th spot, man, I'm going to have to give it to the Sacramento Kings, just because I think it's going to be a great roster that they got together. I don't know if Zion's going to be able to be healthy. Every offseason, it feels like, Jimmy, that it's being said that he's lost weight, he's in the best shape of his life, and then it ends up not being the case. And then Stephen Curry is literally going to be running around like a madman trying to create offense for a team that's still going through him umpteen seasons after. Like, it just feels like it's going to be a difficult year for them, especially with Clay gone. But who knows? The second coming of the Splash Brothers, who knows, Jimmy? Your call, though.
So West is interesting because I think Memphis, who had the worst injury luck of maybe any team in the league last year, yes, including the Cavs, won 27 games last year. The last 2 seasons that Ja Morant was available for most of the year, they won 55 and 51 games. So I'm ready to put. I'm assuming that they are going to rediscover that form, and I'm going to put them into my top 6. So that means somebody's got to go from last year. The Clippers are an easy subtraction. It gets harder now with the domino effect there. Now we got 10 teams that won 46 games last year, and I'm picking one to miss the playoffs here. The Clippers are again staring me in the face. It's James Harden and Kawhi. I get it, but I don't know. I still think I'll say this. I'm trying to be careful the way I phrase this. I think James Harden is a different kind of player now. However, I do still think he can be the engine of an offense of a decent regular season teams. And I think the world of Ty Lue. I think he's one of the best coaches in the league. And for the, 35, 45, 55 games that Kawhi Leonard is going to play this year, the Clippers will probably be a tough out. I don't know how to square that with all these other teams. Because again, when the Clippers, the vision of the Clippers is they can play with any of these teams for one series. But I think I'm going to knock them out of the playoffs altogether, make my job a little bit easier, if not only for peace of mind. The other thing we have to mention here, year 2 of Victor Wembanyama, the Spurs ain't winning 22 games this year. That's going to change things a lot. The Rockets were a nice surprise last year, 41 wins. You would think internal development there brings them a step up. So I also believe that there's enough parity in the NBA where it's just not going to look so similar. So I'm building from the bottom. This is how my brain works. I think I want to, as much as I like De'Aaron Fox, DeMar DeRozan, Domantas Sabonis, individually, I think it's going to be a little clunky with them together. So I might knock the Kings out of the playoffs this year and move the Rockets in there. I'll keep the Lakers as a play-in team. I am very skeptical about LeBron James, off-ball player, and JJ Redick being able to implement everything that he wants to do because of LeBron. if there's one thing Cavs fans know, it's that a LeBron James team is kind of going to look like a LeBron James team no matter what. And you know what? For the most part, it probably should. He's the greatest player of this generation, maybe the greatest player of all time, depending on who you talk to. I don't have time to have that debate today. But I think there will be some growing pains there. So I'll keep the Lakers in the play-in. I like the Pelicans' talent too much as a whole to keep them out of the playoffs. I love Tyus Jones for the Suns. I love Mike Budenholzer for the Suns. This is where it gets tricky because I'm high on the Warriors. I think Steph is still a top 5-ish player in the league, and I think that yes, they lost Clay, but the tough thing about the Clay situation last year is that Clay was having a hard time. Yes, he's a loss, and it's going to be weird to see him in Dallas instead of Golden State. For the Golden State Warriors regular season win total this year, and honestly, their 2024-25 ceiling, probably not the worst thing that Clay's gone. It was just such a tricky situation. He had a hard time accepting that he was becoming a different player. Steve Kerr was having a hard time treating him as if he was becoming a different player because he has not only because he has so much trust in Clay over the years, but because of the standing that Clay has. You don't want to embarrass the guy, right? So I think Clay becoming Buddy Hield, now you can treat Buddy Hield the way they probably should have treated Clay last year, as more of like a situational piece. He's going to shoot a ton of threes. He'll do a lot of the same things that Clay did. Obviously, Buddy Hield, not even close to the defensive player that Clay was, and even in Clay's aging, injured state now, the Achilles and ACL injuries taking its toll on his body. Buddy Hield's still not that level of defender, but I don't know. Draymond's still one of the best defensive players walking the earth. I like D'Anthony Melton. I think Brandon Pajemski was doing some pretty interesting things. I think Jonathan Kuminga has a leap in him. I believe in the Golden State infrastructure. I think I might pop them up just because I think over Phoenix in the firm top 6. Just because, okay, man, show me the next time Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal are going to play 60 games together. I'll believe it when I see it. I love Devin Booker. Mike Budenholzer is a great coach. Tyus Jones is a great organizer. These dudes get hurt. That's just what it is. So I got my play-in teams are the Suns, the Lakers, the Pelicans, and the Rockets. And I got the Warriors. Let's put them 6th. I'll throw Dallas 5, Denver 4. I think losing KCP is a huge, Christian Brown is a nice player, but the shooting drop off from Christian Brown or from Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to Christian Brown, I think, is going to be a tough one to navigate. The Nuggets have former second-round pick Julian Strawther, who's a good shooter. He's not the defensive player Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is. I think also if you're Michael Malone, you have Jamal Murray, who's been battling injuries the last couple of years of his career. Maybe it's time to start. You've proven you guys can win a championship. Maybe it's time to start easing your way through the regular season a little bit. I'll put Denver 4. Still an inner circle championship contender. Nikola Jokic is the best player in basketball until proven otherwise, in my opinion. I'll go Memphis 3. Again, regular season wins machine when John Morant is healthy. Minnesota 2. Oklahoma City 1. We're tied for the 1.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
What's up?
Pause. Memphis Grizzlies as the 3 seed. You saying they're going from 27 wins to 50 some?
They're not starting from 27 wins. They won 55 games and 51 games the last 2 years they were healthy. This is not a jump. They're going back to where they were. Some of the lineups that they were putting out last year were not real NBA lineups. Jaren Jackson was hurt. John Morant was hurt. Desmond Bane was hurt. They had no chance. Right. And they still played spunky. Taylor Jenkins is a good coach. That's a dude who knows how to get buy-in. I like him a lot. And I just like the way that he limited interactions that I've had with him in press conferences. He's pretty blunt about what's going on with his team. He will always sidestep he used to always sidestep the Dylan Brooks questions and is this John Morant off the court situation? Do you need to step in there? He doesn't answer those questions, honestly. I understand why he doesn't. But when bad basketball is happening, Taylor Jenkins will tell you why bad basketball is happening. And I appreciate that. But yeah, this is a regular season juggernaut. Has been the last couple of years that it's been healthy. I think they will go back to doing that again. So yeah, but the Thunder, by the way, 57 wins last year. Now you add Isaiah Hartenstein. I just love what OKC's doing. They're going to win a lot of games. They're young. They have so much depth. They have everything that screams we're going to win 60 games this year.
Yeah, I agree. I just think the West has gotten better since Ja has been out, and I think they have gotten more mature since Ja has been out. And I don't know where Ja's game is gonna be at, right? Because he was not only out because of suspension, but he was also out because he was injured, and like shoulder injuries. He's a dunker. He's gonna be flying around. Ja Morant, to me, is one of the most like injury based players potentially possible because of how he flies around. I love the way he plays the game. So much energy, so much bounce, so all of these different things. But the way he lands, every time he comes down from the rim, it feels like he's gonna break something, hurt something, tear something because of how he plays the game. And like that's completely fine. If he ends up having a Vince Carter level career, great. But like and everybody talks about the comparison between Derrick Rose and Ja Morant. Derrick Rose landed much more elegantly than Ja Morant does, and I can only envision that happening for him, and it's so bad because I love how he plays. I love him as a player, but like I just don't. I can't see them as the 3 seed, especially in the stacked Western Conference that seems to just keep getting better. But I will say that I could see them in a play-in seed. I'm not giving them one of the 6 playoff seats, though. To me,
I think they're a lock for a top 6 playoff seed. By the way, even if Ja Morant has missed time before, and they have rattled off regular season wins without him, they had Tyus Jones back then. They have Marcus Smart now. So if Ja Morant misses time, I think they're going to be okay. And so the West has gotten better since Ja Morant was last. I mean, it was 2 years ago when they were last a big time regular season wins machine. Let's go from last year. The Thunder obviously got better. Caruso, Hardenstein, they're going to be a juggernaut. The Nuggets, I think they got worse. They lost KCP. They didn't replace him. They lost Bruce Brown from their championship team 2 years ago. The previous offseason, they didn't really replace him. Timberwolves, I think, also got worse. The downgrade from Randall to Cat on offense is notable. Their defense will still be really good, which is why I project them to be another top seed in the Western Conference when I have them second. Yeah, I think that's a good place for them, but it wouldn't surprise me if Memphis was better than them. The Clippers, I took them out of the playoffs entirely. We know what's going on there. Dallas, okay, I would love to, they have the Clay thing now too, because they're telling him going in, you're the guy that can, Kyrie, I think Kyrie said that media day that all of our dreams are possible because Clay is here. Yeah, I guess. Okay. Yes, you got better as a shooting team, but is Clay cool being a spacer, or does Clay want his usual diet of shots? We'll see. I don't know. Your defense it's a challenge to have Kyrie, Luka, and Clay out there and play good defense. Jason Kidd has figured it out with Kyrie and Luka on the court in the past, but we'll see. The Suns got better, but they're old and injured. By the way, I hate to do this to the Cleveland folks listening to the pod, when I heard the Suns could bench Bradley Beal. Well, he makes a lot of money, and I think the Browns know through 5 games, Browns fans know a little something about trying to bench someone who makes a lot of money. Anywho, next. The Lakers are the same, if older. The Pelicans could be better. The Kings, weird fit. Warriors could be better. I don't know. I don't think that the Western Conference I don't think the Western Conference is all that much more challenging. The West is always a beast. That's how it's been for my entire life, it feels like. I think Memphis is why it's going to be part of why it's going to be a beast this year.
I like it. Throw me off guard a little bit, Jimmy. I like it, man. So those are where we have our power rankings for the Eastern and the Western Conference. I think when it comes to the play-in teams for both conferences, it's a toss-up. Anything can happen in an 82-game season, and I feel like it definitely is going to come down to, just like last year, the last couple of games. And I mean, last year it took till I think the very last game for the Thunder to earn the top seed in the Western Conference or whatever it was. So it's it's something that is always intriguing, and that's what makes it interesting, right? Because it's not like you always know. I feel like for the East, Boston's going to be at the top, but everybody else is like, okay, we're kind of figuring things out as we go along. But Jimmy, before we wrap up, anything else you got for us before we get out of here?
Enjoy the preseason, friends. Don't
Sir.
invest too much into it. Don't invest too much into it, but enjoy it. It's. I'll tell you this. I'll say this one thing about the preseason. We don't need to talk about. I mean, we are going to talk too much about the preseason on this podcast going forward, unfortunately. But we don't need to. You will see what Kenny Atkinson is trying to do during the preseason, and then it will be interesting to see how that compares to what ends up happening during the regular season. Preseason is a blank canvas on which a coach tries to paint on. The regular season is when we do stuff, but the players and coaches both like. We've talked a lot about what Kenny sees in an ideal world versus what is actually possible with this roster. You're going to see some experimentation in the playoffs. The preseason is a rare window into a coach's mind, a coach's freewheeling mind that you don't really get to see during the regular season because you're trying to win so many games. So take it that way too. Don't get mad about preseason rotations. Please don't do that. Don't invest time in preseason results. But just note the process. Note the process during the preseason, and then compare it to what you see when the games start.
All right. With that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. We'll get you into a Hey Chris episode sometime this week, probably after game 1 of the preseason. So, if you want to send your questions or you want to just tell one of us, probably me, that my rankings or power rankings are completely wrong, subscribe to Subtext and we can talk. So, to get this information and to shoot your roast out, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who signed up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast. It's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.